Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's session. My name is Danny, and I'm the event planner for the New York Reactor. Before we begin, please take a moment to review our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional, and on topic. Useful links will be shared in the chat. This session is recorded and will be available on demand in 24 to 48 hours on the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel. Which brings us to today's session. It will run for approximately 1 hour with times for questions throughout. I will now turn it over to our speakers for introductions.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's really nice to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining us for the first series in our new session where we are talking about getting certified to take the Power BI Data Analyst role-based certification. We're going to start with some introductions and then we will jump into the content. So Stephanie, why don't you take us away?
Thank you. Hi, Shannon. Hi, everybody. We saw in the chat there's people from all over the place. We're so excited that you're here with us today. My name is Stephanie Bruno. I'm a data platform SVP, and also you can find me on datawitch.com, where we have a whole bunch of tutorials and helpful information.
And Stephanie, where are you joining us from?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and you can maybe hear my dog, and who's also joining us here from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Sorry about that.
Alrighty, and good morning, everyone. My name is Shannon Lindsay. I am on the fun team at Microsoft, the Microsoft Fabric community team, and I am so excited to be here with you all today. Before we get started, we just wanted to mention that this is live and interactive. We have so many people on the line. Thank you so much for joining. We want to make sure that you get what you came here for. So please ask any questions that you have in the chat. We have some experts live on the line, and then we will also try to address some of your questions if we have time for it. So let's just take a look at who our moderators are. We have two of our favorite friends here today to work with us. We have Dr. Gomati, and you've already seen her in the chat. We also have our friend Gonzalo, also seen him in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us, and I can't wait to learn from you when we see the answers to the questions. All righty. Stephanie?
What is this? This is not what I thought we were presenting. This is a surprise. What is going on here? We got a letter?
Sure, let's open it.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, did you know Power BI is turning 10?
Can't believe it. I think I did know, but wow.
So we are going to be having a huge celebration organized by our friends at Microsoft, and all of us in the community are going to participate. So please join us, bring your friends. We're going to have contests with prizes. We're going to have more live sessions. We will have some Power BI celebrities. Guy in a Cube is going to be helping us out. And we will also have what I know everyone here is looking for, which is our discount certification vouchers. So go ahead and jump over to aka.ms/PBI10, and you can learn more there. And we have another fun announcement. Speaking of those discount vouchers, we are offering, along with this session and for our Power BI birthday, we are offering a 50% discount voucher for exam PL-300 and DP-600. And during the presentation, we'll get into a little bit more what are all of these random numbers, in case anyone is wondering what those are. Do be aware that the offer expires at the end of August and supplies are limited. So if you'd like to request your voucher today, go ahead and jump over to aka.ms/PBI10/cert50. And last but not least, we mentioned we would have contests. We are kicking off a Data Viz contest on June 24th, so just in a few weeks. Along with the contest, we are going to have a live session with our design experts where we're going to help beginners figure out what it is that they need to do to participate in this challenge. We're going to take a look at the data set, and we're going to talk through how you can participate. So if you're interested in that, please join us at, oh, me too, and I can't wait to learn from the data viz design experts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like you've had a couple of these come up now, but it's pretty new. So I think if you are interested in participating in something like this, now is definitely the time.
And it's for the birthday. How fun.
Great.
All right, and last but not least, we have a program that we want to share with everyone, and I believe some of our super users are on the line here, where we have incredible animations on the slides. We have some users that we recognize in our community who help us answer questions on our forums. They post the knowledge that they have in blog posts, and they publish tutorials and demos. So if that's something you're interested in contributing to, you can check out aka.ms/fabric superuser to learn more.
Note about that. Sometimes you feel like, oh, I don't have enough experience to do that. You know, other people know more than me, but your voice does matter. And there are people that your voice is going to resonate to. So don't hold back. Just start jumping in and participating in there. And then before you know it, you're a super user.
Love that. All right, and last but not least, we have our second annual Microsoft Fabric Community Conference coming up in Europe. It's going to be in Vienna this year, and that is the 15th through the 18th of September. We are offering a €200 early bird discount right now with the code FABLIVE. So if you hop over to this URL, you'll be able to find more information about that. Stephanie, you attended the FabCon Europe last year. What are your thoughts about it?
I think it was fantastic. And, you know, if you're coming from Power BI land and you're thinking, oh, I don't know, I'm not ready for Fabric, that's a lot bigger than I, am ready for. There are a lot of intro sessions. In fact, I will be giving a pre-con workshop half day for kind of an introduction to Fabric to sort of get you ready for the conference. So if you're interested and, you think I really need I'd like to get a 101 on Fabric before I jump in, then please join me for this workshop. We'd love to see you there.
What a fantastic opportunity. Excellent. And just one other of these pre-conference workshops that I'd love to plug, we also have an introduction to Power BI. So if you have any colleagues who are planning on joining or would like to join, and perhaps they're more on the data engineering side of the house or data science, and you want to let them learn a little bit about Power BI, you could offer that to them as well. So lots of great opportunities.
I think for everyone.
Excellent. All right, so now back to our regular scheduled programming. This is what we're here for today. I hope you know where you are. You are in the first session of our Get Certified series. So we're going to be taking you through the 4 groups of skills that are covered on the Power BI Data Analyst certification exam. Now, you may be here and you're not planning to take the exam, and that's completely fine. These 4 groups of skills cover a lot of Power BI from end to end, and it's going to be a great opportunity for you to learn about this tool. Stephanie, any other thing you want to mention about the series?
I just love how the series is broken down because it's broken down the same way that the exam is broken down. So it's really got 4 sections, and that's why you see 4 main sessions here, plus the exam prep and Q&A. That's a fantastic session to go to. If you have not taken a Microsoft exam before, you're going to hear all about the little tips and tricks to help you just get ready for exams in general. So I just love how this is organized.
Excellent. All right. Well, now we are going to take off our witch hats and get down to business.
All right.
Stephanie, why don't you kick us off?
Yes. Okay. So again, you're here for this Getting Certified first session, right? So today in this first session, we're going to be covering preparing our data. So we'll just talk about the exam overview. We're going to talk about this whole preparing section. So that involves getting data from your various sources, profiling it, cleaning the data, exploring it a little bit, and then doing some of those important transformations for loading it to get it ready for your model. And we will also just touch on some practical tips for success with the exam. But again, remember, there's that whole session that's going to be devoted to that later on that I highly recommend going to.
Incredible. Thank you. All right. So Stephanie, why don't you take us into an overview of what is this exam? What are we doing here?
Yes. Okay. Fantastic. So we're going to talk about the fundamental skills here that data analysts would need to know to be able to pass this exam. This is an advanced role-based certification. So that means you have to have some practical experience really to be successful with this. The modules, the learning modules that we'll discuss are fantastic, but it really helps if you have some hands-on experience as well. So let's just talk a little bit more about it. Can you go to the Oh, you already did go to this one. Okay, so we have these 3 exams actually within the kind of Fabric Power BI ecosystem. There is the PL-300. So now we're decoding those numbers Shannon was talking about. So this is mainly focused on Power BI, and this exam has been around for a while. But this is your core Power BI exam. And then we've got the DP600. This is the first one that came out for Fabric, which is the Fabric Analytics Engineer. And there's some overlap here because there's a lot of Power BI in this exam as well as other Fabric concepts. So if you're interested in kind of doing all these 3 and you've come from a Power BI background, this is kind of a great order to take it in, the 300 and then the 600. And then finally, now we have the 700, which is for the data engineer. So there's actually not much Power BI on this one. This is more of the whole data engineering concept. So maybe you come from a data engineering background and you're just kind of learning Power BI now. So then you might go the other way. You might start with that 700. But today we'll focus on the 300.
All right. Sounds good. So speaking of the 300.
Yes. So as a certified Power BI data analyst, you need to be able to demonstrate methods and best practices that align with your business and the technical requirements for modeling, visualizing, and analyzing data with Power BI. So that's why we've got the breakout that you see here. So on the bottom with these 4 sections, we've got preparing data, talking about today, modeling data, visualizing, and then managing and securing.
All right.
We got a little zooming in there. Okay. So again, this is how this whole series is broken out, right? You can see we've got these 4 sections here, these 4 bars, and this is how much of the exam is going to be based on these sections. So 25 to 30% is preparing data. Here we go today with that. And then the future sessions will be on the modeling, visualizing and analyzing, and then managing and securing. So these are a little further breakdown. We get a little bit more detail here on each of these sections. And I love how we're seeing, this is what we're covering today, right? So preparing data using Power BI. We can see that we're going to be getting data, profiling and cleaning, and transforming. And this is all, you can find all of this in the, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not the practice test. Study guide. That's the one I'm looking for. Yes, the study guide for the PL-300. So you don't have to take screenshots and memorize what you're seeing here. This is all laid out in that study guide. You will see the details of each section that you need to learn on. So today we're focusing entirely on the preparing data section.
Excellent. Thank you. That was such a great overview. All right. So before we jump into the actual bits and pieces we're going to talk about today for data prep, we just want to level set and make sure we're all on the same page with our knowledge of Power BI. I'd love to know if folks can drop in the chat, how many years have you been working with Power BI? Or if this is your first year, maybe you can identify as a newbie or whatever you feel comfortable with. But I'd love to see just where people are at. That'll help us know kind of what pace to go through with this.
While we're waiting for that answer, we did have a question from the audience, which was, what are some advantages of having an actual certification aside from the skills gained? And I can take a stab, and maybe you want to add on, Shannon, but for me, one, it can show potential employers that, you've got the skills, you know what you're doing. It's proof of it right there. If you're not looking for another job, but maybe you're looking for a promotion in your current job, this can show that you're taking an active role in skilling up. So that's another reason. And then, yeah, the skills learned. Like for me, if I'm not actively doing everything in the exam in my job, I might want to take the exam because it will force me to study those areas that I'm not actively working on. So those are three that jump out at me. Do you have any to add on?
Yeah, I think the one for me that really hit home is I have some issues with confidence. And so I thought, oh, maybe I don't know this that well. And then when you take and pass the exam, you're like, okay, maybe I do know this stuff. So it just helped me with my own professional development and confidence.
Same, totally agree with that. Yeah.
All right.
All right. So
So
what is Power BI?
so we've got loads of people in the chat that have been using Power BI for many, many years. So I feel like they can just finish the session. But no, genuinely, Power BI is now a part of our larger data ecosystem that is Microsoft Fabric. The reason we're including this slide here is just because it's important to know that yes, Power BI often is used as a standalone product. And if you are looking to expand your data estate and to get all of your data under one roof in a software as a service platform, Microsoft Fabric is the place for you. So in this series, we're focusing on Power BI's role in this ecosystem, and that is really the very end of the journey where we are presenting data to our stakeholders. But before we can present the data, we have to make sure that it is manageable and that it is in shape for us to be able to share the data in a way that people can draw insights from it. So the important thing to know here is just that in the flow of Power BI development, we are getting data from somewhere. That's what we're going to talk about today. We are preparing that data usually in Power BI desktop, and then we are sharing that information with our stakeholders in the Power BI service, which is the web service, and also in the mobile application, and potentially even embedded in your own websites. So just very brief overview. Stephanie, is there anything I missed that we should go over before we jump into our data prep?
No, not really. I mean, it just really makes it look so limited, but I just feel like Power BI is so big and there's so many opportunities. You can do so much with it. I mean, once you build out your semantic model, for example, people can consume it in so many ways. There's just so much more available to us, but we're going to be talking about, the basic structure today, but just know that sky's the limit with what you can do with this.
Thank you. And I agree. Okay, so we are going to now talk about how do you get data into Power BI and how are you getting that data there so that, of course, again, the end goal is so that people can access and use that data and it's at their fingertips immediately. So in this section, we're going to talk about how to connect to a variety of data sources. Now, this slide is a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot going on here, but the whole point that we wanted to mention here is that Power BI enables you to connect to and combine data into what we call a semantic model, the artist formerly known as data model in Power BI. And there are hundreds of connectors of data sources that you can connect to. And so with Power BI and kind of the back end of Power BI, which is called Power Query, you can connect to that data, you can transform it, and then you can make sure that every single time you need to refresh that data from the source, we can automate that and build it right in. There are a couple of different connectivity modes that we're going to talk about, but the important thing to understand is that by default, when you are in Power BI and you go to connect to a new data source, the default connection type is what is called an import model. Okay, so you are essentially connecting to your data and you are storing a bit of your data in Power BI itself. That's the most simplified way to state that. Stephanie, did I miss anything there?
No, I think it's a really good point because there are a few different modes to consider when you're doing this. But a lot of times, import, I would say, is used in the most cases for good reason. It's very simple. But also it is important to know that you are putting a copy of your data there in Power BI. So there are some implications of that. You need to refresh your data. You've got a copy of it. You're duplicating it, which can all be fine. But these are things that you do want to think about.
All right, and it is important in your real world application of the tool and also to understand for the exam the difference between these different storage modes in Power BI. So like we just talked about, import is the most common, it's the default, it's the fastest storage mode in Power BI. There are a few others that we're going to need to know about. Those are direct query, which is where the data lives in the source system and Power BI is connecting directly to that. So there are some implications where there is an impact on your source system that you need to think about. There are also some implications with the visuals have to query the original source to bring back the visuals. So you may find mixed results with speed on that. We also have something called dual mode, and that is a mix of import and direct query. I'd love to know in the chat if people are using dual storage mode and maybe a best practice there. I think that one can be a little tricky, but also can have some huge advantages. And then last but not least, if you or your organization has the fabulous Fabric trial or Fabric licensing, there is a new storage mode called Direct Lake, where your Power BI report is connected directly to the One Lake data lake the One Lake Lakehouse in Microsoft Fabric. So of these 4 storage modes, Stephanie, do you have a favorite?
I love direct lake mode. I did not always love working with direct query because it is more challenging to be able to make it performant. Direct lake mode with your data in Fabric in a lakehouse or warehouse is very, very fast. So I really like this because I don't have to refresh my semantic model and I only have one copy of my data. So generally now I use direct lake more than I use import. So I think direct lake I would say is my new favorite.
All right. And there is a question in the chat asking if Direct Lake will be on the test. And the answer to that is no. You need to understand that it exists, but that's the extent of what you need to know about Direct Lake for the PL-300 certification. It is limited to the Power BI ecosystem.
That's a great question.
Okay, so now we know that we can connect to all of these different sources. We now understand there's something called a storage mode, and we're going to pick the right storage mode for the right situation based on our data. Then after we've connected and selected that storage mode, we need to configure the connection and make sure that it is secure, make sure that it is flexible, and make sure, most importantly, that it's reusable. So we're going to start by identifying the right data source, obviously, or shared semantic model, which is something we can talk about, which is especially important when we're working in collaborative environments where the models might already exist. So Stephanie, do you want to talk actually a tiny bit about connecting to existing semantic models and what that looks like?
You just set me up nicely. Thank you for that, because that is the best way to go. So a lot of times when you're getting started with the Power BI, if you're new at it, you know you have to build a report. And so the first thing you think is, well, I got to get all the data. And then somebody wants another report that looks kind of like it, but it's different. So then you think, well, do I need to do all that again? No, ideally, you will connect to a semantic model that you have already created and published to the service. And it's already got everything. It's already got your relationships. It's already got your measures. You just want new visuals. So you can do that with this live connect mode. And ideally, when you're thinking about how to design your models and your reports for your organization, think of it as not one model per report. Really think of, okay, how can I make a really reusable model so that I don't have to duplicate all this work that can support multiple reports? Your future self will thank your past self for thinking about that in advance.
And Stephanie, will that fix my problem of having slightly different numbers in every single report?
It sure will, because you will only have to define that logic once. Yeah, so this is the way that we can do less work and have more success, which is always the goal.
All right, so the key that I'm hearing here is leverage shared semantic models where you can. It'll be important to understand on the exam what those are and how to use them. The next piece of the puzzle here is to configure your settings. Depending on what your data source is, you're going to need to make sure that you're properly authenticated to that. It includes setting or updating credentials and also defining privacy levels. And that controls how Power BI handles your data as it's combining sources. This piece of the puzzle is actually fairly simple once you understand it. The actual doing, implementing, configuring these settings is just some clicking around in the Power BI service, which is great, or in your report as you're building it. And then finally, we want to encourage all of us to use parameters to make your reports more dynamic. So parameters let you switch easily between data sources or allow you to filter data without editing queries as you're working on your reports. And these are just great for reuse and scalability. So the three pieces of the puzzle here, connecting to your sources, configuring your settings, and creating and modifying parameters will all be on this exam. And they're just essential pieces of the puzzle when you're building reports. So as you move through this process, you will be doing these by default.
And one thing to note about parameters is once you publish your report to the service from desktop, you can change the values of those parameters in the service. So it really gives you a lot of flexibility. A common example is where maybe your source data has, tens of millions of rows, and you don't want to import all of those while you're working. Maybe you only want to import the last 3 days worth of data. So make a parameter for that. Then once you publish to the service, you can say, okay, now in here, I actually want all the data. So that's a very common scenario. It's just really nice how you can change those parameters once it's published.
Yes, I love that. Okay, so we have covered getting data and what data you can get. Stephanie, do you want to take us into the next piece of the puzzle here?
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of times, we don't necessarily know what does our data fully look like. It's good to take a minute once you've pulled that data in to make sure it's what you're expecting, right? That everything looks how it should. So we've now connected to it, right? We need to understand what we're working with. We can use Power Query to do that. So we can check for things like missing values, outliers, and inconsistencies. Yes, so right here, this is exactly what the interface looks like for that. And maybe you can zoom in on that up there for a second, that little, thank you. Yeah, okay, so we have these built-in profiling tools in Power Query. You can see where they are in the interface, just like that. So we can see column quality, distribution, and statistics. So this will help us spot issues early before we load all that data in. So these tools show us, yeah, like the missing values or weird formats or something that isn't what we expect. So what can we see with this? Well, the column distribution will show us the distribution of the data within the column. So you can see this image here of what this distribution looks like. The profile will give us more details about the data in the column, like basic statistics right there. So we've got the count, we've got how many errors we might have, what are the distinct number of values, the min, the max. So this is that nice statistics. We also get the value distribution graph, which tells us the counts for each unique value in that specific column. So we can see all of this before we even load that data to the front end and start exploring it. It's all right in here. And then also, yeah, we saw the statistics. Yes,
Can I jump in with a question? What if I forget to do this? What if I load the data and I forget to look at this? Can I go back?
Oh, yes, easy peasy. So you just turn those on. You do not have to reload the data to be able to see that. It's just those check marks are just whether or not you're seeing it. But it's already there. So if you have forgotten to do it, just turn it on later and you will see it. One thing to note, Shannon, if you zoom out, is on the bottom left, it will tell you how many rows it's doing this profile on. And so the default is just the top 1,000 rows. If you need it to do more, you can just click on that button right there on that top 1,000 rows and say, actually, give me everything, profile it on all the data. So that's an option too. Just note that that's there. It kind of hides down there in the bottom left.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, and I think we have a little video here, right? So we get to see how this works in action. So yes, Power Query gives us this range of tools. So we can do all kinds of things when we want to clean our data a little bit. So we might want to remove duplicates or errors like we're doing right here. I see we have a blank, but we don't really feel like we should have a blank in this column. So it should be something else. So we can very simply say, for this column, please replace an empty value with my anonymous customer. And you can see as we did that on the right, we got a step in our applied steps process telling us that we did that. So we can see some other things we want to do. Our uppercase and lowercase on those names was a little bit off. Very simple click of a button, we can fix those up. Same thing with the region here. And here I see that we have a written out number 3. This looks like a numerical column. So I'm just going to replace the written out typed 3 with the actual number 3. Now, once I do that, I can change the data type to be a number. This is going to make me be able to do things like sums and averages on here. If it were text, I couldn't do that. And if I had tried to change it, the data type, while there was that text in there, that would have broken, that would have shown up as an error. So these are all the little kind of things that we can do when we want to clean and fix our data before we bring it into the model. Actually, it's not all of them. There are way more than we just showed you, but those are a sample of the ones that you can do.
Stephanie, thank you. That is such a nice overview of the things you can do. And actually, one thing you mentioned that really jumped out to me, I have an Excel background. I don't come from a deep data background. And something she said that really just like perked my ears up is you can do all of these transformations with just pointing and clicking. Like there's not a language that you need to know. But Steph, if I wanted to dive deeper and I wanted to learn a language, what's happening in there?
Yeah, so you would use the M language here, and you may have noticed, again, actually, if we went back to the video, but in the very top, there's a little bar, and it almost looks like the Excel formula bar. And this is the actual language that it spits out right up here, table.transform column types. As you're clicking around behind the scenes, it's really developing this code for you. And so one thing that's kind of nice to do sometimes is you can just change it a little bit right in here. It's if you read it, sometimes if you're maybe changing a column name from one thing to another, for example, and you realize you changed it wrong, you don't have to delete that step. You can just go right up here into this little bar and change it right there as well. So it's really nice. If you want to go kind of deep dive, you can do everything code based. You don't actually have to use the interface, but I don't know who would choose that other than a few people in the world who love writing M code. But that is available as well. And it's also good to know what some of these M functions are.
So are there things you can do with the M functions that you cannot do in the clicky-clacky user interface?
There are some, yes, definitely. You can really go wild with M. But you do not have to know that for the exam. But certainly there are additional things you can do through code that are not available in the interface.
Cool. Oh, I'm trying to get to the next slide, but I'm struggling. 1 second.
Oh, no.
Oh, am I here? Okay. I'm going to start this again.
We're back to our video.
Yes, we are cleaning and fixing data issues.
Right, which we just did. So we can move on from this one.
Okay, fantastic.
Right.
I'm learning right along with you all.
So
okay.
Now that we've done a little cleaning, right? So we've cleaned up our data. We have done things like, if it's a CSV file, we have made the first row headers. We've cleaned out some errors. We've fixed data types. We've done things like that. But so now we need to transform it, to reshape it to fit our analysis needs. Now, one thing we're not exactly covering in here today is, the importance of building a star schema. This is something that you will learn in the modeling section, but you will want to make sure that you've thought this through in advance so that you don't end up with your one big wide table problem. You will want to think this through. What's the best way to organize my tables? Once you've thought it through, now you're going to be coming in here and you're going to be doing this transforming and loading. So we'll do things like maybe splitting columns, merging columns, pivoting data to get it in shape for that proper star schema. Once we get through with that, then we can load it into Power BI. All right, so let's do some of that. We're going to do a little shaping of our data here. So it starts with making sure every column has the right type so that it can interpret it correctly. We need to create new columns, maybe split some things. So let's see what we are doing here in this one.
And
Okay, so up at the top,
yeah,
we can see that we have a lot of choices here, right? So for our cleaning, you can see that what we're in is the Transform tab up along the top with the ribbon here. And the Transform tab has so many choices. A very common one is this use first row as header. So I'm kind of going left to right here. I won't read through all of them, but you can just get an idea of things that you might need to do. Another really common one I use all the time is the pivoting and unpivoting. I think we're going to see that in here today. I never remember which one I want. Am I trying to pivot or am I trying to unpivot? Half the time I'll choose the wrong one, but it's no problem because Power Query is so easy that when we get those applied steps on the right, if I've chosen the wrong one, I can just X out of that step and come back and choose the right one. So one thing to note, if you're new at this, it's very forgiving. Don't be afraid of breaking something because you won't. You can undo the things that you've done. I've learned that from experience. I've made so many mistakes. Okay, so those are some things we can do. We can replace values, we can split columns. And another thing to note is there's not just one way to find these functions or these tools. A lot of times there's multiple places. So for example, if you want to replace values, you can go up in the ribbon, or you can right click on the column header and replace it there. So there are a lot of ways to find the same thing. So don't get confused if you're seeing it in one place and you see it in another and you think, is it different? It's not different. It's the same thing. It's just trying to make it available so that you can find it.
Excellent. That's helpful.
Yeah. Did you have anything to add on that one?
No, I mean, nothing to add except for the fact you mentioned that it's forgiving. And I think a part of understanding how you need to shape the data, some of that happens here in Power Query, and some of that happens when you start building visuals and trying to write some DAX calculations to put some metrics on the page. And then you think, that data might not be shaped exactly in the way that I wanted it. So I agree with you. For me, it's always trial and error. And like you mentioned, you can remove steps on the right-hand side. Someone did mention in the chat that there is no Control Z in Power Query, which
is a good call out.
But instead of Control Z, you can remove a step. Now, with that being said, if you remove a step and you realize, whoopsie, I didn't mean to remove that, you can't just Control Z and re-add it. You actually have to physically re-add the step. But like Stephanie mentioned, it's super forgiving. You can play around with it. You can see exactly what's happening as you do it. So you're learning as you go, and nothing is hidden behind the scenes. You know exactly what you're doing.
Well, and also a double-edged sword. It doesn't auto-save. So a lot of times, if I'm messing around and I make a mistake and I delete something I don't mean to, I'm just going to close that file and reopen it without saving. So that's another way to get around it. Good, bad, I don't know.
That tip will not be on the exam. All right, so more of aggregating and shaping. What are we looking at here, Stephanie?
Well, sometimes we have to summarize it, right? We might need to group sales by region or average scores by category. So we can do all of this pretty easily with Power Query. We can do grouping with aggregations. We can shape data using pivot, unpivot, which we talked about. Never remember which is the right one, but that's okay. So that's what we're actually going to do right here. You can see that we have a column for every month here. That doesn't really make sense. That's not the best way for Power BI to work. So you saw all we did was click a button and we unpivoted all of those months. So instead of columns, they became rows. This is going to make everything a lot more flexible for you. And additionally, what's really nice is if you get more columns that come in your source data, this is going to still work. So it will still just unpivot everything that's not the selected column. So this is a really nice, simple transformation feature.
Stephanie, can you talk us through a little bit? You mentioned if you get more data, then the same transformations will happen. How does that work?
Yeah, I love that. I always think of Power Query as kind of like a little assembly line in a factory. And what I've done, my assembly line, is the applied steps on the right. So anytime that I click the refresh button, it's going to go out, it's going to get that source data, And so if that source data has been updated, maybe with new rows, new files, new columns, it's going to try to feed all of that source data right through your assembly line. So that's something to be aware of. Depending on how your steps work, if the format of your source data has changed, it may break. So you got to kind of watch out, because, for example, if Shannon had clicked pivot these specific columns unpivot, as opposed to unpivot other from the first one, then if she got new columns, it wouldn't pivot the right ones anymore. So you always have to think about what are data updates going to look like, and are they going to get through my assembly line correctly when I click the refresh button or I set up a refresh in the service.
Cool. Thank you. That's super helpful. All right.
All right. Oh, and we can also combine. This is a really great feature. This was actually the first thing that made my jaw drop when I started to learn about Power Query, was the ability to combine multiple files. So you can see, for example, in this one, we click the combine files because what we have is a series of CSVs. They're in a folder. I don't have to write any code. I can just tell it, look for all the files in this folder, maybe filter it down to CSV files, and then I can just click this button and it will generate all this awesome Power Query in the background, a bunch of helper queries, and it will combine all of those files. So again, like we were talking about before, now if I get a new file added here, maybe I get, sorry, I can't even read the years. I get some 2020 CSVs, right? I don't have to change my code, because it's, as long as they're still in the same format as everything else, it's going to just combine them along with the original ones. So I love this feature.
This is super cool. So I'd love to know, this one was a mind-blowing for me initially. How many people on the line have an experience where you get a data dump from some sort of system every month or every quarter, and then people want to know, like, the very next day, what's going on in the data? I'm sure some people on the line experience that. This is just so cool. So what's going on here is that when you are refreshing the data, or depending on how you set it up, when a new file gets dropped into that folder, Power BI is picking that up, and then it's going through that assembly line that Steph just explained to us. All of your transformations are being applied, and it's going to be added into your report. It's like so magical.
Yeah, I mean, before that, all I used to do is manually combine a bunch of Excel files into one, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. You don't have to do that with this. It's magic.
Cool. All right, and what else can we do here, Stephanie?
Oh, there's so much we can do. So we did a little bit of combining multiple files. We can also merge, right? So a merge is kind of like, if you come from a SQL background, you're just doing like a join, right? So maybe you, after you've gone ahead and designed how you think your model should look, you notice that you have two tables that really in the model ideally would be one. You'd really like them combined into one table. So this is what you can do with a merge. You just choose the columns that match. And then when you expand your merge, you choose the columns you want from both tables. It's really nice. Again, no code. It's very much like a join in a SQL query.
Okay, great. And then what's this
Also
thing?
Well, we can also append. So maybe you've got one source of data like here where it's the store sales, another that it's the wholesale sales. They have all the same columns. So again, in your model, these should really just be one table. They should all be combined into one table, right? But we're not doing a join. We're just, instead of adding columns, really, we're adding rows. So we can append as well. Yeah.
Okay.
And always, goal is simplification. Anytime that you can combine tables into fewer tables, that usually feels like the right way to go.
Okay, hot tip.
Okay. So loading and configuring our data. So before moving into modeling, we need to make sure that our tables really are ready to be related to each other in the model, for example, because we need to make relationships for this all to work. So this means identifying keys like customer IDs and product codes that will link everything together. So we need to just look and make sure we've got those in there. We also will want to enable or disable a query load, because sometimes, for example, if we're doing one of those merges, maybe we don't need the original table to show up in the front end of the model. We were just using it as an intermediate step. So we need it, but we don't want it to show in the model. So all we do there is we disable the query load for that one. Again, this helps us simplify what's coming in. And then finally, it's good to understand query dependencies. So that's what we're seeing right here. We can see that the unpivot to long table is dependent on the wide table, right? And so more than likely, we will be disabling the load on the wide table, and we will just be showing the long table. So this is just a view. We can't actually do anything here in these query dependencies, but it's a nice way to just check that everything is connected and dependent as you expect it to be.
Excellent. Okay, so let's pause for a minute. We talked about combining files, we talked about merge, we talked about append, and now we're looking at relationships and star schemas. We have a question in the chat that asks, when should you merge versus make relationships versus create a whole star schema? How do you know when to do which of these tasks?
Well, it's more of an art than a science, I think, because you could, instead of merging in many cases, you maybe could have it in the front end. However, maybe it just makes more sense to be all in one table. Sometimes if you find in your model that you have a one-to-one relationship between two tables, that's kind of a good clue that I've got exactly the same rows in one as I do in this other. Why don't I just put those into one table? It's just going to help me with that simplification. So there's really no hard and fast rule about when to do a merge versus multiple tables. But I know for me, I always feel like the fewer tables I have in my model, well, but still a star schema, so I still want my facts and my dimensions, probably the better. That will mean fewer relationships and less complex logic. I don't mean to say that you should get it down to one wide table. You should never do that. You still want to have your facts and dimensions. But if you can combine some of those into fewer where it makes sense, I think that's a good thing to aim for.
Incredible. And if you would love to learn more about why do we not want one wide table, because we all start there. But if you want to learn more about that, go ahead and join us in our Model Your Data session, which is coming up. And you can learn about that in the PL-300 series.
Yeah. So what are some other, kind of last tips for performance, Shannon? What do you think?
Well, performance, again, like Stephanie mentioned, is absolutely an art, not a science. And something that you're going to learn, you're going to understand as you work with Power BI more, is that there are different places where you can improve performance. Right now, we're talking only about performance recommendations for loading data, but you can also make different pieces of the report and the model more performant. But here for loading data, the key that I like to think about, and this goes along with the kind of no wide tables mantra, when you are bringing in data into Power Query, we only want to keep necessary data. Stephanie, why?
For reasons, like you said, for data refresh, also for the ultimate size of the model. Depending on your licensing, you'll have limits for how big your model can be. So if you have extra columns that nobody's using and they're not used for a relationship, they're just clogging up your model. They're taking up memory. They also can impact performance. So get rid of both columns and rows that you don't need. If you only need to be showing visuals on data for the past 6 months, don't pull in the last 10 years worth, right? So also get rid of extra rows.
That is a great tip. And Steph, I'm just jumping to the next bullet here. How might incorrect data types slow down your data loading?
Oh, this is a really good one. For example, a very common one to think about is if you have a date time column and you really only need to be showing the date, it's keeping so much more data in memory to be having that time column. And this kind of goes into the next, time part of your date time column. This kind of goes into that next bullet point of reducing cardinality, because a date and a time together, it's going to be many more unique values in those rows. If you don't need that, if you really only need the date, lop off the time and you'll save tons of space. Another one is numbers. If you really only need 2 decimal places, then put that into the fixed decimal point data type as opposed to the numeric data type, because maybe you don't need 12 decimal points. That's also taking up a lot of memory. So these are ways to make it more performant and tidier.
Tidier, I like that. Okay, and speaking of keeping things tidy, what might disabling the query load do for me?
Well, you won't be pulling that data in, right? So it won't have to store that in memory. So that's also going to reduce both clutter and memory.
Okay, fantastic. And then last but not least, how can using parameters help me improve performance for data loading?
Well, we touched on that one a little bit earlier. So you have a limit really in how much data you can pull in to desktop, right? Based on your machine. So limiting how much data you come in via parameters is a great way to use them, so that when you publish it to the service, you can just change that parameter value so that you can actually get all your data. So it will make your development faster too, because it will make that Power Query preview, it won't have to process as much data.
Incredible. All right, so now that we have all seen these performance recommendations, we are all performance optimization experts, right?
Absolutely, definitely. I mean, I really do think we're kind of ahead of the game just by keeping these in our head. I've done so much work with customers where all I really had to do was reduce cardinality and clean out junk that wasn't in their model, and the performance shot up.
All right, incredible. Okay, so this does bring us to the end of our prepare data in Power BI skills that not only do we need to know to work as a Power BI data analyst, but that are covered on that PL-300 exam. Quick reminder, check the study guide to understand what it is you need to know for the certification exam. Before we jump into these quick tips, I did want to answer one question in the chat that looked interesting to me. And that was, can you speak on whether to prepare facts and dimensions outside your model rather than doing a star schema model within Power BI? Now, again, I'm going to plug the Model Your Data session to learn more about this, but just at a glance, Stephanie, do you have a response to this?
Yeah, I mean, either way, you are developing a star schema, whether you're doing your transformations to your facts and dimensions in Power Query or you're doing it more upstream, which is generally recommended. I mean, this seems like a good place to plug Roach's maxim, which is prepare your data as far upstream as possible, as far downstream as necessary. So you may not have rights to be able to build the data warehouse. You might only be able to consume what someone else gives you. In that case, you're going to be doing it in Power Query. But ideally, if you can, yeah, you would push those transformations further upstream into a lakehouse or a warehouse, for example. But either way, you are still going to be developing a star schema with facts and dimensions. So it's kind of a yes and question here. So yes, if you can, it's a good idea to push those transformations upstream. But either way, you still do want to have those facts and dimension tables for your star schema.
Okay. Yes, and is basically my favorite answer of all time. So thank you for that. And just a quick shout out, speaking of yes, and I want to give a shout out to our colleague Pam, who is in the chat, getting people to raise their hands and hyping everyone up for future sessions. So thanks so much for being here, Pam. Now we're going to jump into some quick tips for passing your exam. And we really are going to be quick. We do have 7 minutes left, so we'll get through this and then we'll take a couple more questions. We want to mention this in every single session because it's really super important. As you saw in the schedule, we do have a whole entire session on how to pass the exam. But as you're going through the study guide and you're going through each section, today we covered the prepare your data section. The most important piece of the puzzle is the hands-on practice. Power BI actually makes this fairly simple for us, particularly when it comes to the data prep and modeling, because we can use Power BI Desktop for this. It is a completely free tool that you can download and use on a PC. So if you have a PC, you can download Power BI Desktop and you can practice right in there. If you do not have a PC, we have exercises and labs in Microsoft Learn. And within those exercises and labs, you will log into a virtual machine that will then let you work within Power BI Desktop. So our actual hands-on prep resources are really there for Power BI, particularly for this data modeling and building your reports piece. So my top tip for exam prep is really make sure you're using the tool. That will help you understand not only the different kinds of questions you need to answer, but especially answering the case studies that are on the exam. So that's my top tip. Stephanie, what's your top tip?
Love the practice exams because they really give you a feel for what to expect. So I think after going through all of the Learn course and the study guides, taking those practice tests is very helpful just to get you comfortable with what to expect.
Excellent. All right. And I'd love to hear from you all. We've got so much experience in the chat. So if you have taken this exam already, or if you've taken and passed or not passed any other Microsoft certification exam, drop your top tip for passing the exam and preparing in the chat. We'd love to see that.
Oh, and I do have one more top tip about that, actually, which is that you might not pass the first time. And if you don't get discouraged. Don't give up. Please, please give it another shot. I have certainly not passed every exam that I've tried to take. You know, it's don't wait for perfection. You know, just do it, do your best. And if it doesn't work out, try again.
I love that. I think that's a great way to wrap up this section. All right, so we have now gotten through the majority of the content. We've got a couple of announcements, and then we'll see if we have a moment to answer one more question. But before we do that, we have a bunch of opportunities coming up that are celebrating Power BI's 10th birthday. And the key to celebrating the birthday is all of us. We are the users. We are the people Microsoft built this product for, and we're celebrating our work over the last 10 years. If you're just joining us, welcome to the fray. So we are going to have an actual birthday party in June and July, and you can find information about that at aka.ms/PBI10. You also saw earlier, we've got this 50% discount voucher, and that is PL-300 and DP-600. Those both include Power BI, which is why they're here. We also wanted to shout out our super user community, and Stephanie mentioned in the beginning, becoming a super user is actually just so cool because you can start out by answering people's questions, which helps you learn and it helps the community. And last but not least, we've got our Power BI Data Viz contest coming up. We are kicking that off on June 24th with a live session similar to this. And I think we are going to pause here. Let's see, is there one question you wanted to respond to, Stephanie?
I did see one. There was a question about if you don't pass and you want to take it again, is there a cost associated? So I say, yes, there is. You would have to get another voucher if possible, or you would have to schedule that. Way forever ago in the past, there were sometimes an opportunity if you didn't pass where you could take it again for free. I have not seen that more recently. I think what we're seeing a lot of now is all of these fantastic discounts. Sometimes there's even 100% discounts. So just keep an eye on the Learn page and the study guide, because this is where you're going to see a lot of these discounts that become available over time. So there's really no guarantee on what we can expect as far as discounts, but we've been seeing a lot of them. So while you generally don't get a free retake, there are a lot of these vouchers.
Incredible. And there is a question in the chat that's actually going to lead us right into this slide. Carolina was asking, are we going to review gateways? And you'll see here that the July 2nd session is called Manage and Secure Power BI. And it is in that session that we will touch on understanding gateways. So we will do that on July 2nd, and we will see you there. But before that, our next session is on June 18th. And this is the session I feel like we've been talking about all along, which is modeling your data. It is really really the foundation for using this tool well and having fun with it, I would say.
Yeah, don't skip that one. Very, very important. To me, it's the most important. Make sure you go to that one.
All right. And we are going to go ahead and close out here. If you have questions, if you need additional resources, you can find those at aka.ms/PL300/prepare. Thank you all so much for being with us. We super appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us, and we hope you found this helpful. Stephanie, any last words?
Just thank you so much to the moderators, as well as just all the activity in the chat. I love seeing everybody helping each other and answering questions for each other. So thank you so much for all of the engagement here, and best of luck. I think that you're all going to pass. So go forth and become certified.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.